Rhetorically, ask yourself this question: to whom or to what do I belong? I belong to what? I belong to a neighborhood association. I belong to a school. I belong to a baseball team. I belong to a club. There are lots of things that we belong to. All of us belong to a parish. But we belong to a family. We belong in a marriage. We belong with children. But the number one thing we belong to is Jesus Christ. He is the number one answer. I belong to Christ. It is actually possible to belong to a church and not belong to Christ. There are many people who do it. They get involved in all the organizations of the church. They might even belong to the parish council. They might even belong to the ushers. They might even belong in the church all the time. But they don't have a moment where they can truly say, I belong to Jesus Christ. That's what we read about in the epistle today. St. Paul confronted the Corinthians at a time of division. In the Corinthian church, people were saying, I belong to Paul, I belong to Apollos, I belong to Cephas, I belong here, I belong there. And Paul says, you got it all wrong. We belong to Christ. We belong to Christ. And with this idea that we belong to Christ is where unity comes from. Unity comes when we're all on the same page. What's wrong in our country, among other things, is there is great disunity because everybody is on their own page. If you ask most people truthfully what they belong to, they will say, I belong to my own thoughts. I belong to me. I belong to no one. And that creates a disunity. Christ wants us to be unified, and he wants us to be unified in him. The devil is the one who promotes disunity. Now, going to the gospel lesson, which is well known, the multiplying of 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed 5,000 people. Imagine the scene, a hot day like in Tampa today, and Jesus speaking to the multitudes and healing the sick and turning nobody away. And the day is now very long, and it's getting dark, and the people are tired. And even the disciples beckon Jesus, send the people away. They're tired, the day is over. And Jesus says, no, we're not going to send them away. We're going to feed them. Now, the gospel doesn't say if one person provided the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. It doesn't say if Jesus asked for a volunteer, if he canvassed the crowd who had what. But 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish would not go very far. We've cut more than 5 loaves of bread for the people in church this morning. We're a couple hundred, and you get a little cube of bread. Not enough to hold you over for any significant amount of time. Now imagine being the person in the crowd, or maybe a couple of people, who had those 5 loaves and those 2 fish. Maybe that person was like a Boy Scout. Be prepared. I'm going to the sermon of Jesus, and 5 loaves and 2 fish is good for me and my family. But now the call is saying these people are hungry. If I give away the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, how am I going to eat? Maybe I should feel bad about these people. Or maybe I shouldn't feel bad about them. Maybe I should curse at them that they didn't prepare the way I prepared. But imagine the faith of the person who said, here is all I have, 5 loaves and 2 fish, just take it all. Maybe I'll get a couple crumbs in return, because you divide 5 loaves and 2 fish by 5,000 plus men and children, you aren't going to get more than a couple of crumbs. Imagine the faith that person had to surrender all that they had to feed the hungry. But without the faith of this person, without their contribution, there could be no miracle. Yes, Jesus can create from nothing. Only he can do that. We can't do that. But generally speaking, we know that 0 times anything is still 0. When this person offered a meager 5 loaves and 2 fish, 5,000 men were filled. Now let's look at the magnitude of the miracle, because the numbers don't really tell the story. 5,000 men plus women and children. If the average family has 3.24 people in it, that's like 16,000, 17,000 people that were fed. with 5 loaves of bread, like the kind of loaves they put down in a restaurant. Imagine the biggest loaf of bread you can imagine, even 5 of those. And it says that those 17,000 people were filled to the point of being uncomfortable. It doesn't say, it says in English where they were satisfied. In Greek, the word is echortastisan, which means filled to being uncomfortable. We've all had the feeling of eating too much, where we go past what was good, and then we ate too much and we feel sick to our stomach. That's the kind of satisfied that this word is. So 17,000 people ate to the point of feeling sick because they ate so much. And after all of that, there were 12 baskets that were taken up of the leftovers, and the 12 baskets were not like the bread basket that we're going to have in front of the church. In fact, the word that they use in Greek is the word kophinos, which is the word coffin. Now, imagine the size of a coffin, or the kufukthon in the back. That's kind of what they buried people in, an elaborate tomb. Imagine 12 of those filled with bread after 17,000 people have eaten to the point of being sick, and all of this from 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's how big this miracle was. And that's the kind of miracle that Jesus can do when we offer something to him in faith. He can do what seems impossible. We cannot do the impossible. He can do the impossible. I've spent a couple weeks away from here. We got in very, very early this morning, late flight, storms all over the East Coast. I slept like 2 hours last night, so rather than being refreshed today, I'm exhausted. But while being away from this, I have time to think and gain some perspective, but mostly to think. We have some golden opportunities here. We have a full church, and most of us aren't here today, and the church is still full. We were passing by many small churches in New England. We went to New England, in case people are wondering where I went, to Massachusetts and Maine. And Lisa asked me yesterday, how do you think these churches survive? I mean, there's so many of them, of all different flavors. And I said, I don't know. I can't imagine they have the size congregation that we have. Again, many of them in small towns. So we have this golden opportunity because we're not small. We have many people, and many people have many talents. But we also have some challenges here. The biggest challenge is in 2 weeks, we're not going to have a pastoral assistant for the first time in 9 years. That's a challenge. The pastoral assistant, whether it's Vasily or Father Kyriakos or Alex, wore a lot of hats, one of them being the chanter, but even smaller hats, opening doors and acquiring things, like the MacGyver of our parish, if you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to ask for people to step forward and do things while we figure out what we're going to do with this position. We have an opportunity at some point in the near future to be rid of our tenant, which will be a great relief to me personally, because we're not in the landlord business. We were never meant to be in the landlord business. We are a church. The church has one interest only, to bring people to Christ. When we divide the church and we put emphasis on other things, then we don't belong to Christ. We belong to the business. And we have this opportunity, whether it's coming in a year or two, it's coming shortly, and you'll hear more about this from me. But this idea of not having a tenant means that we're going to have to step up on stewardship. It means we're going to have to take a chance, like the person with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, to give to God and let him multiply it. We're not multiplying anything with our tenant other than my blood pressure. And if you want to take a walk back there, they're systematically destroying your property. It's your property. They're destroying it. So we can continue on this way, or we can go and we can be a church. But it's going to involve people saying, here, I have 5 loaves, 2 fish, whatever it is that I have, that I can contribute to this, so that we can go be what Christ calls us to be. We have many ministries in our church. In fact, we're going to have a ministry fair at the end of the month. We're going to have a meeting of ministry heads. But we don't say, I belong to Goya, or I belong to the choir, or I belong to the Philoptochos, or that I belong to the parish council. We belong to Christ, and we express our belonging to Christ in these various ministries. And I encourage you, and I will encourage you, to get involved in at least one of them, so that we can express our belonging to Christ through one of the ministries. But the ministry is not an end to itself. The end, it's a means to the end, which is Jesus Christ. When we give, he multiplies. And it starts with faith to offer what we have. The guy with the loaves, by the way, probably thought he was offering nothing. Even though he was offering everything he had, he probably said, well, I mean, what can I possibly do? I got 5 loaves and 2 fish. What can I possibly do for all these people? He probably thought he wasn't doing much of anything. He didn't step forward and say, I can solve the problem of everybody. He didn't do that because he knew he couldn't. He knew that only Christ could do that. So he didn't step forward with great fanfare. He stepped forward with humility. Here, Lord, is what I have. And look what Christ did with that. Look what Christ did with that. So if we have a little bit of humility, a little bit of faith, and we offer what we have, think about what Christ can do with that. And think about what we need Christ to do with that.